August 8, a U.S. court handed Chevron Texaco a victory that lets it hide billions in assets in the U.S. that it owes to indigenous peoples in Ecuador, who have been ruined by the corporation's intentional polluting of their ecosystem. With this new ruling, the U.S. declared it is now a safe haven for Chevron's billions. It's the latest win for Chevron as it uses various schemes to reinforce its refusal to honor the lawsuit it lost in 2011, when it was found liable for nearly $9 billion in damages to the planet and people. I went to the Amazon to see for myself what was behind this unprecedented battle, where one of the richest corporations in the world has been fighting for decades to avoid returning a fraction of the profits to the land they were recklessly extracted from. What I found was a story that's largely hidden, but constitutes one of the biggest environmental disasters in the world, with even bigger implications in regards to corporate impunity for crimes against humanity and nature, in an era of growing, unchecked corporate power. The environmental significance of the Ecuadorian Amazon cannot be overstated. It has such mind-blowing biodiversity that more species exist in the Amazon basin than anywhere else on Earth. It's home to tens of thousands of species of insects, plants, and trees, with double the amount of distinct species of birds than in all of North America. While in the rainforest, I was mesmerized by the constantly changing array of remarkable flying and crawling creatures. The region is also rich in cultural diversity. It's home to thousands of indigenous peoples who have fished, bathed, and drank from its waterways, living in harmony with the environment for many thousands of years. But after just 30 years of Texaco's presence, that peace between humans and nature was radically altered. The Texaco Corporation, today merged with Chevron into the energy giant Chevron Texaco, sunk its teeth into this rich habitat back in 1964, when it was invited by a pro-US business military dictatorship, the same year the regime suspended Ecuador's elections. During its drilling there, until it left in 1992, Texaco dumped a shocking 17 million gallons of crude oil into the open, festering pits in the rainforest. But the pollution went much further. A catastrophic 19 million gallons of contaminated, oil-filled wastewater was dumped into the same habitat. But none of this was an accident. Texaco intentionally poured this oil into the Amazon by using cheap, profit-maximizing techniques so destructive that they were banned in Texaco's home country of the United States. At one point, Chevron was deliberately pumping an estimated 4 million gallons of toxic waste every day into the soil. Over 5 million acres of once pristine jungle were polluted, devastating an untold amount of living things and potential for new life. To compare Chevron Texaco's damage to the next biggest oil spills that have rocked the planet, the Exxon Valdez spill was far less, with 11 million gallons of crude oil spilled. Including the oil waste, Texaco is responsible for dumping 1,700 times more toxic fluid. The scale is comparable to the BP disaster, the biggest accidental oil spill in history. While BP spilled around 132 million gallons of oil and toxins, Chevron dumped over 140 times that in liquid waste and oil. But even that calamity was an unintended consequence of cost-cutting measures, whereas Texaco's dumping in the Amazon was a conscious decision, implemented for decades. When Texaco first set up shop, they saw the payoff of investing in a country where corporations were given free rein. Exempt from normal industry standards that minimize pollution, Texaco's wealthy shareholders saved an estimated $1 million per well. They went on to build hundreds of these wells in their feeding frenzy. Everywhere Texaco decided to extract oil, it built a platformed well. Each of these wells was surrounded by oil pits, where excess oil was disposed of, so much so that they sometimes reached 34 feet deep into the earth. Each platform had at least 3, but sometimes up to 8 of these poisonous pits. All in all, Texaco built a total of 344 of these oil wells, adorned with 1,200 stinking pools of crude oil waste left to rot this rich environment. When Texaco decided to cash out and vacate the operation in 1992, it tried to cover up its environmental crimes to avoid future liability. Many of the pits were simply covered in dirt to shroud the poison bubbling underneath. Local residents also attest to Chevron employees burying the evidence in wells. The pools that were too difficult to cover, Texaco lit them ablaze in a hapless attempt to incinerate decades of pollution. I toured one former Texaco site with Paula Carrera Ubidia, a biologist who's worked extensively in the affected area. She showed me the damage that Chevron tried to hide.
Certain species of plants, of native plants in the Amazon, are capable of growing in such toxic conditions. Some of them are very adaptive and somehow make it within this very toxic environment. This is one of the, from the Eurasian family. And we have, in previous times, we have seen how in some of them it's even possible to see part of the oil, part of the crude, coming up all together with the latex.
We just broke this, and on the bottom, it looks fresh, right? And then you break it in the middle, and you can see just tons of crude that are just saturated in the stem here. And that's pretty much how all these plants are.
Just the fact that they have all these carbon and hydrogen together make it extremely toxic for life in general. If you touch it, your skin has the ability to absorb part of it, and at the same time, they have other types of chemical molecules associated, which are which evaporate very easily. So what usually happens in places like this are two phenomena. One of them is that the rain mixes with everything, and it starts separating, and chemical reactions are produced. Mm-hmm. And so you start getting this oily film on top of the water. And part of it has all these TPH, which are the volatile molecules that would come out and be liberated to the air when the temperature rises.
In 1993, when the first lawsuit was leveled against Texaco by the affected communities for their disaster, the company entered into an underhanded deal with the sitting government to embark on a remediation cleanup process, attempting to exempt themselves from liability in the civil case. This great atonement by Texaco didn't even scratch the surface of the damage. Of the estimated 1,200 disaster sites, Texaco dictated conditions that only required them to remediate 264. Of that number, Texaco used a legal loophole to declare over 80 sites as requiring, quote, no action. Of the remaining 180 or so pits they claimed to have tended to, their cleanup methods were a sham. So this is one of the pools that Chevron called remediated. As you can see, it is full of crude that has been surfacing over the past couple of years. This is the smallest of three pools. A giant landfill actually covered a lot of the pool with dirt and vegetation, but you can clearly see right here what's underneath the surface. And when you pull up some of these, it looks like the vegetation's growing healthy, but when you pull it up and break it apart, you can see that obviously crude is still growing in the stalks of these plants. It's as if it was brand new, It's hard to believe that this has been here for so long and it's still this fresh looking. But it gets worse. Many pits where Texaco dumped waste were built strategically by natural waterways so that the pipes could drain the overflow oil directly into the ponds and rivers below.
And it's very easy to show it. If we go to the end of this pipe, of this tube, which goes directly to the swamp below, right? It's very easy to see how all the water that has come out of this directly, right, has contaminated a huge part, if not pretty much all of the swamp. That is an open door to the rest of the ecosystem around it, right?
So this is one of the pipes that Chevron built to maintain the level of the pool, kind of it looks like the vegetation's growing healthy, but when you pull it up and break it apart, you can see that obviously level of the pool kind of maintain the illusion that the pools were under control, when in reality these were pushing out all of the overflow just right into all the rivers and swamps below. Because of the corporate giants' secrecy and shadiness, the Ecuadorian government still cannot find around 300 pits known to be festering like a cancer somewhere in the lungs of the world. Chevron Texaco denies these hidden pits exist, but I saw for myself that they are tragically very real. So this pool full of toxic crude oil actually wasn't even claimed by Chevron as part of the remediation process. They left it as is, and then they just absolved themselves, wiped their hands, and said, this is Ecuador's responsibility. We don't even recognize this as part of our own operation. But really all it takes is standing here to see this is real. You can't fabricate something like this. So this is what happens when you put your hand in the ground about 3 inches. It's just a disgusting, corrosive, sticky, crude mess. And that's what's covering this whole pool. It's just globules of crude right here, everywhere. Just giant balls of oil. It smells disgusting. It smells like you just poured gasoline all over your body. While each oil pit takes up hundreds of square feet, its actual reach is much wider, infecting all flora and fauna that try to live in its proximity.
This is what's left after a process of decomposition of the crude, right? They stay as little balls over there, which have separated from the heavy metals, which mix with the water and stay below, right? And what you see on the surface, pretty much, is the rest of the oily part of the crude that permanently stays on the surface layer until it gets removed and taken away by the animals. As the oil choked the life out of the rainforest, it did the same to entire human societies living within it. The Kofan people, one of the only communities in the Amazon that still practices a traditional lifestyle, is in danger of being eliminated as their family members die off. They and several other indigenous groups have had their cultures irreversibly altered by the incursion of big business. Like a rare species of flower going extinct, these cultures are forever lost, itself an unspeakable affront to humanity. Along with the thousands of native peoples impacted, tens of thousands more migrants brought by Texaco's development were sentenced to a similar fate. Rates of certain cancer are found to be 10 times higher near the oil fields than that of the Amazon basin as a whole. At least 1,400 people are proven to have died already from cancer of Texaco's pollution, but the true number is likely much higher due to lack of adequate data. Thousands more still live with an array of ailments. Children under the age of 10 are most at risk, experiencing higher rates of birth defects, leukemia, and learning disabilities. Chevron did not respond to our request for an interview on the matter, but the company continues to deny any link between this health crisis and their millions of gallons of crude oil. But while in the Amazon, I heard the raw truth from the victims themselves.
Desde que he migrado para acá, esta provincia, desde Bolívar, donde no hay contaminación de petróleo, me he dado cuenta que al migrar a este lugar en el año 84, 86, se llegó desde el lago Agrio hasta lo que es Coca, Chuchufindi, proyecto. El petróleo se lo miraba vertir o regar en las calles, carreteras, en las vías, o sea, todo era petróleo. Uno llegaba, los zapatos se le pegaban, cuando venía el sol se calentaba, venía la lluvia, se volvía un jabón y daba malos olores, también nos producía angustia, la ropa se nos manchaba, pero para nosotros pensamos que eso era normal.
Aquí llegamos nosotros con el fin de tener un día mejor, porque venimos de la provincia de Loja, habían hartas tierras, al comienzo era un paraíso aquí. Nadie entendíamos qué cosa era contaminación. Al transcurrir de los años, los entendidos fueron diciendo que el petróleo traía contaminación. Comenzaron, al comienzo era